There is a reason most people stay stuck, a reason they go year after year wanting more but settling for less, a reason they can taste their potential but can't seem to step into it. It's not talent, it's not resources, it's not even lack of opportunity. It's mindset. Not just any mindset, but the one you carry when no one's looking. The default setting of how you think, how you decide, how you respond to pressure, how you show up in your own life. Because mindset is not about thinking positive. It's not about repeating affirmations. It's not about vision boards or mantras. Mindset is the internal framework through which you interpret everything. It determines whether you act or hesitate, whether you rise or fold, whether you finish or quit. And if you don't take ownership of that mindset, if you don't condition it deliberately, it gets built by accident. It gets shaped by your past, your fears, your failures, and your environment. It becomes a loop of old reactions, outdated beliefs, and half-truths that hold you back from living at full capacity. But there is one shift, one core mindset that, when installed, changes everything. It doesn't just make you more productive. It doesn't just make you more motivated. It rewires how you live, how you lead, how you respond to adversity, how you speak to yourself. And once it clicks, your life is never the same. It's the mindset of ownership, radical ownership. The mindset that says, if it's in my life, I take responsibility for it. No blame, no excuses, no outsourcing. Just complete, unshakable responsibility for your energy, your focus, your results, and your future. Because when you take ownership, you stop waiting for things to change. You stop negotiating with weakness. You stop explaining your inaction. You stop blaming your circumstances, your past, your boss, your parents, your schedule, your stress, and you start taking your life back. You realize that even if it's not your fault, it's still your responsibility. That even if someone hurt you, you choose how long you carry the wound. That even if your circumstances are difficult, your mindset doesn't have to be. That even if the odds are stacked against you, you still get to decide how you show up. And the moment you accept that truth, you become dangerous, because now nothing is off limits. No challenge too big, no failure too final, no fear too loud, because you've removed the one thing that keeps most people stuck, the need for someone else to fix it. From this point forward, everything you do, every decision, every response, every step is filtered through that mindset. What would the strongest version of me do right now? That becomes your compass. Not comfort, not convenience, not emotion, but alignment, responsibility, truth. Ownership is not just an idea, it's a way of living. It means that nothing is outside your influence. It means that every part of your life, your routines, your relationships, your finances, your health, your results, are a reflection of what you've accepted, what you've tolerated, and what you've created. Not just consciously, but unconsciously, through your habits, through your standards, through the decisions you've repeated over time. And if that idea makes you uncomfortable, good, because it should. Because the moment you stop blaming anyone or anything for where you are, and you stop waiting for something or someone to pull you forward, you finally step into the only position of power you've ever had, complete control of your response. But here's what happens. People hear this and they nod their heads. They agree with it in theory. But when life gets hard, when emotions get heavy, when things don't go their way, they retreat. They fall back into old stories. It's not fair. I'm doing my best. This always happens to me. I don't have the time. I just don't feel like it. And those stories feel justified. They feel real. They feel like truth. But they're not truth. They're defense mechanisms. They're the mental scaffolding we use to protect our identity when the pressure hits. When ownership would mean confronting the fact that we've been inconsistent, undisciplined, avoidant, passive. But if you want to change your life immediately, you have to be willing to confront those things. Not from a place of shame, but from a place of truth. Because without truth, there is no transformation. Without truth, you're just putting effort on top of excuses. And that's why so many people stay stuck, because they're working hard, but they're still lying to themselves. So here's the mindset that changes everything. I take full ownership of everything I create and everything I allow. Not just when it's easy, not just when things go well, especially when they don't, because that's when you find out who you really are. That's when you find out how much you've really grown. When you wake up tired and you don't want to get up, but you do. When someone disrespects you and you want to lash out, but you don't. When things fall apart and you want to run, but you show up anyway. That's ownership. And that kind of mindset builds character. It builds respect. It builds discipline. Ownership is not about blame. It's about power. It's not about saying everything is your fault. It's about saying everything is your responsibility. And that distinction matters, because once you take responsibility, you can fix it. You can shift it. You can lead it. But as long as it's someone else's job, you stay stuck. This is where most people get it wrong. They think ownership means never being hurt, never failing, never struggling. That's not ownership. That's perfectionism. And perfectionism is just another form of fear. Real ownership says, yes, this is hard, but I'm still responsible for how I respond. I'm still responsible for what I do next. So if your life isn't where you want it to be, own that. Own your patterns. Own your distractions. Own your excuses. Own the part of you that keeps sabotaging progress because it's scared to let go of comfort. Because until you own it, you can't change it. You cannot transform what you won't take responsibility for. You can't improve the things you won't admit are broken. You can't rise if you keep handing your power to circumstances, to emotions, to other people. Ownership is the beginning of every breakthrough. Because once you take full responsibility, you become unstoppable. You don't need to wait for someone to motivate you. You don't need permission. You don't need the right environment. You create your own momentum. You create your own clarity. You create your own opportunity. And every time you follow through on that commitment, you prove to yourself that you are not the victim of your life. You are the leader of it. You are not being dragged by your story. You are writing it. You're not reacting to your circumstances. You are shaping them. It starts with small things. You say you'll get up at 6. Do you? You say you'll go to the gym. Do you? You say you'll stick to your budget. Do you? You say you'll have the hard conversation. Do you? That's where ownership lives. Not in big statements, in follow-through, in daily execution. And when you build that track record, when you consistently honor your own word, you start to believe in yourself again. Because the gap between what you say and what you do disappears. And that alignment creates peace. It creates clarity. It creates self-respect. Because nothing kills confidence like breaking promises to yourself. And nothing builds confidence like keeping them, even the small ones, especially the small ones. because those are the ones that stack, the ones that shape your identity, the ones that tell your brain, this is who we are now. So if you want to change your life immediately, stop outsourcing your power. Stop blaming. Stop waiting. Stop hoping, and start owning every result, every pattern, every outcome. Start asking better questions. Not, why is this happening to me, but what am I going to do about it? Not, who's responsible for this? But how can I lead through this? Because that shift, that mental shift from blame to responsibility, is the foundation of everything. That's where clarity lives. That's where focus sharpens. That's where real progress begins. Once you make the shift into ownership, everything around you begins to reorganize. But here's the part most people never prepare for. When you raise your standard internally, your external life often starts to break. Because the patterns, the relationships, the environment that were built to match your old mindset can't survive your new one. And that's uncomfortable. It's disorienting. You think something is going wrong, but it's not. That's exactly what's supposed to happen. Growth breaks things. It has to. Because the version of you that was built for survival, the one who avoided discomfort, who rationalized every distraction, who let emotions lead every decision, that version built a world to match. And when you stop being that person, you stop feeding that world. So it starts to crumble. Some people walk away. Some habits fight to stay. Some emotions hit harder than they used to. It's not a setback. It's a signal that you're shifting out of alignment with who you used to be, and that your environment is adjusting to the new you. This is where most people retreat. They start to build momentum, but then the resistance rises. A relationship gets strained. A temptation shows up. A wave of old emotion knocks on the door. And instead of holding the line, they drop back down, because growth costs comfort. And until you understand that cost, you'll keep paying it in the currency of your potential. You have to know what's coming. You have to expect it. The day you choose ownership is the day the old version of you begins to die. And that death doesn't go quietly. It kicks, it cries, it throws a tantrum. And if you mistake that noise for truth, you'll think something's wrong. But that voice that says, this is too much, you're not built for this, just take a break, you've done enough, that's not truth. That's history. That's programming. That's the residue of who you used to be, fighting for its survival. And your job is not to fight it. Your job is to outlast it. You do that by staying consistent, not perfect, consistent. You hold your standard even when your feelings don't match. You stick to your plan even when the outcome isn't immediate. You follow through even when motivation is gone. Because motivation will always leave you. But if your standard is high enough, you don't need it. And that's the mindset that will change your life immediately. Not just ownership, but unshakable standard. A level you refuse to drop below. A line you don't cross, even when it would be easier, especially when it would be easier. You stop saying, I'll try. You stop saying, I hope. You stop saying, if I feel like it. And you start saying, this is what I do. This is who I am. This is non-negotiable. That's how real identity is built, not through affirmations, but through actions. You don't need to tell people you've changed. They'll feel it. They'll see it. Because your behavior speaks louder than your words. And when your behavior consistently reflects your new standard, the world begins to respond differently. People treat you differently. Opportunities meet you differently. And results start to stack faster than you thought possible. But here's what most people miss. When the results come, they relax. They let up. They stop doing the things that got them there, and then the momentum disappears. Not because they didn't want it, but because they didn't anchor it. Because the mindset that created change was never turned into a lifestyle. So you have to lock it in. And the only way to lock it in is through repetition, through systems, through friction. You make it easier to succeed and harder to slide. You schedule what matters. You prepare before the day begins. You simplify your decisions, because structure is what protects your identity when emotion wants to take over. Most people lose progress not in moments of crisis, but in moments of drift, when they stop checking in, when they stop tracking their habits, when they stop asking the hard questions. So you build reflection into your rhythm. You ask, am I slipping? Where am I making excuses? Where am I tolerating what I used to challenge? Because your old life won't disappear on its own. You have to replace it. You have to crowd it out with so much clarity, so much execution, so much alignment that there's no room left for the patterns that used to run your life. That takes intention. That takes planning. That takes real honesty. But more than anything, it takes a decision. The kind of decision that says, I'm done living beneath my potential. I'm done doing things the easy way. I'm done pretending I don't know what's holding me back. Because you do know. You've always known. It's not lack of knowledge. It's lack of consistency. It's the gap between what you say and what you do. And once you close that gap, your results follow immediately. And the way you close that gap is not by doing more. It's by doing what matters better. It's by building better systems. It's by making fewer decisions and keeping more of your promises. It's by turning standards into habits and habits into identity. This mindset, the mindset of radical ownership and unbreakable standard, does not wait for permission. It does not check how it feels. It acts, it leads, it builds, and then it repeats. When you take full ownership of your life and raise your internal standard, you start to notice something powerful. Your tolerance for mediocrity disappears. You stop tolerating half effort. You stop tolerating weak conversations, passive goals, and emotional laziness. You start to feel a deep discomfort with anything that doesn't match your new mindset. And that discomfort isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're becoming someone new. This is where your environment starts to matter more than it ever has. Because the people you surround yourself with, the habits that shape your day, the ideas you expose yourself to, all of it is either reinforcing the person you're building or pulling you back into the version you've outgrown. You cannot live with a mindset of ownership while keeping company with people who excuse everything. You cannot lead yourself with precision while immersing your attention in chaos. You cannot rise in discipline while living in an environment that feeds distraction. Your external world is a mirror of your internal commitment. If your space is cluttered, your mind is cluttered. If your circle is full of gossip, your thoughts are full of noise. If your calendar is filled with low-value activity, your energy will match. And if you don't take control of your environment will take control of you. It will shape your mood, your beliefs, your habits, and eventually your results. So you start with your physical environment. Clean it, simplify it, remove the friction that blocks your discipline. If the television distracts you, turn it off. If junk food tempts you, get it out of the house. If your workspace drains you, rebuild it, not tomorrow. Now, because your surroundings shape your standard, then you audit your mental environment. What do you feed your mind? What are you listening to? Who are you learning from? What conversations are you having? Every input is shaping your mindset, especially the ones you don't question. You need to be ruthless here, not to judge others, but to protect your focus. You can't afford to hang around people who normalize average. You can't keep spending time with people who talk more than they act. You can love them, but you don't have to let them lead your thinking. Your new mindset requires new standards for what gets your energy. That means less reaction, more creation, less opinion, more execution, less gossip, more truth, less noise, more depth. This is where you learn to lead conversations differently. You start holding people to a higher standard, not by preaching, but by example. You stop playing small to make others comfortable. You stop shrinking your goals because someone else is afraid of theirs. You speak with intention. You move with integrity. You act with alignment. And you stop tolerating patterns in yourself that don't match your future. That includes the way you think, the way you talk to yourself, the way you show up when no one's around, the language you use, the tone in your own head. Because your self-talk is the script your life follows. And most people's script is garbage. I'm not good at that. This always happens to me. I never follow through. I don't know how. I don't feel like it. They repeat it, and their life obeys it. But your new mindset doesn't allow that anymore. You don't entertain thoughts that contradict your purpose. You don't let weakness run your inner dialogue. You cut the language that keeps you small. You interrupt it, replace it, rewrite it with strength, with truth, with identity. You start speaking like the person you're becoming, not the person you've been. I show up whether I feel like it or not. I execute under pressure. I am focused, grounded, disciplined, unshakable. Not because it's always true, but because repetition makes it true. Repetition makes it real. This isn't about pretending. It's about programming. Every time you catch your old script and choose a new one, you're rewriting the operating system of your life. And that new code becomes automatic. Not overnight, but soon. Because identity is not built in a moment. It's built in the patterns you repeat. And when you stack those patterns, when your language changes, when your circle sharpens, when your habits align, when your environment supports you, your new mindset becomes indestructible. Not because life gets easier, but because you stop folding when it's hard. You don't crumble when pressure hits. You rise, you respond, you recalibrate, you execute. Because you've trained your identity to lead instead of react. That's when real confidence is born. Not the kind that comes from hype, but the kind that comes from proof. From knowing that when the moment calls, you show up. That kind of mindset is magnetic. People will notice it. They won't always say it, but they'll feel it in the way you carry yourself, in the way you speak, in the energy you bring into the room, in the clarity you operate with. Because nothing is more powerful than someone who knows who they are and refuses to compromise on it. But that identity must be protected, sharpened, reinforced daily, because the world will test it. Doubt will test it. Emotion will test it. Distraction will test it. And if you don't stay rooted in your standard, you'll revert. Not because you're weak, but because pressure always reveals what's untrained. So you train, every day. You train your mind to stay locked when it wants to wander. You train your discipline to hold when it wants to bend. You train your attention to focus when it wants to drift. Not with willpower, but with structure, with systems, with identity. There's a shift that happens when you've been living in ownership long enough. You stop needing results to validate your process. You stop obsessing over outcomes. You stop chasing proof. You start understanding that who you're becoming is more important than what you're achieving. Because if you keep becoming more, you'll eventually have more. But if you chase more without becoming more, you'll always feel behind. This is where depth becomes the focus. Most people live wide. They try to do more, be more, have more. They stretch themselves across 10 different pursuits, comparing themselves to everyone no. They're so busy looking around. They forget to go deep. They forget to build roots. But real power, real transformation is always found in depth. In doing the work long after the novelty wears off. In staying with the process when no one is clapping. In digging one well until you hit water instead of digging 10 shallow ones and calling it effort. This mindset, the one that changes your life immediately, is the one that says, I'm here for the long game. I don't need it to be easy. I don't need it to be fast. I need it to be real. Because real things take time. Real change takes pressure. Real identity takes consistency. And once you commit to depth, you start thinking differently. You stop asking surface-level questions. You start asking better ones. Not, how do I stay motivated? But, how do I build the habit so I don't have to rely on motivation? Not, how do I feel better? But, what is this discomfort trying to teach me? Not, how do I get there faster? But, how do I become the kind of person who belongs there? You stop looking for shortcuts because you realize they're not shortcuts. They're detours. They make you feel like you're moving, but they keep you from building what really matters. You stop searching for hacks because you understand that habits beat hacks every time. And you stop asking for advice you're not willing to execute. That's what changes everything. When you stop looking for permission to win and start taking responsibility for the work. When you stop seeking external validation and start becoming your own source of credibility. When you stop asking the world to believe in you and start behaving like someone who believes in themselves. And that belief, it doesn't come from positive thinking. It doesn't come from hype. It comes from evidence, from following through, from waking up and doing what you said you would, again and again, until your mind begins to believe it. Not because it's inspired, but because it's conditioned. Your mindset sharpens every time you choose progress over pride. Every time you're willing to be bad at something so you can eventually be great. Every time you pick up the weight of a new habit, knowing it will be heavy at first, but lighter later. And over time, you become resilient. Not because you avoid pain, but because you stop fearing it. You stop running from effort. You stop looking for ways around resistance and start leaning into it. Because now you understand that the obstacle is not in the way. It is the way. You stop measuring your days by what felt good and start measuring them by what built you. Did I keep my word? Did I push through resistance? Did I speak from truth instead of emotion? Did I keep the standard or let it slide? That becomes your scoreboard. And the more you live by that standard, the more your life starts to reflect it. Not all at once, not always in big, visible ways, but in the invisible shifts, in the way you breathe, in the way you walk into a room, in the way you make decisions without doubting yourself, in the way your presence calms chaos instead of feeding it. That presence is earned. It is not natural. It is not gifted. It is built by doing the work when you don't feel like it, by managing your emotions when they want to lead, by choosing courage when comfort is easier. And it builds momentum, because now discipline is not something you practice, it's something you are. Now clarity is not something you chase, it's something you carry. Now consistency is not something you remember to do, it's something you live. But none of that happens unless you're willing to hold the line when no one else is. Unless you're willing to act from identity instead of impulse. Unless you're willing to delay gratification in service of legacy. Because legacy is not built in what you say, it's built in what you do repeatedly. And most people can't do that because they're addicted to novelty. They get bored too quickly. They quit too easily. They change directions every time it gets hard. And that mindset, the mindset of easy over everything, where kills more potential than failure ever has. So you build boredom into your rhythm. You expect the plateau. You prepare for it. You stop needing constant stimulation and start chasing mastery. Because mastery lives in the repetition, in the silence, in the days that feel average, but build something extraordinary. That's the mindset that will change your life. The one that stops chasing moments and starts mastering patterns. The one that stops reacting to how things feel and starts responding to what things mean. The one that lives from identity, not from impulse. There comes a point in your growth when you stop needing change to feel exciting. When you stop needing big shifts to feel like progress is happening. Because you finally understand that real change doesn't look like fireworks. It looks like follow-through. It looks like structure. It looks like you doing the same things on a Tuesday afternoon that you did last Thursday when you were fired up. And when you get to that point, you no longer rely on feelings. You respect them. You notice them. But you don't obey them. You no longer ask, do I feel like it? You ask, is this who I am? Because identity is now your compass. This is where you begin living in alignment, where your decisions, your actions, your habits, and your values all point in the same direction. And that alignment changes everything. Because now, you don't just act differently, you think differently. You see challenge as opportunity. You see discomfort as training. You see effort as a privilege. And when that becomes your worldview, your results start to compound. Not just externally, internally. You start trusting yourself more. You speak to yourself with clarity instead of confusion. You navigate pressure without panic. You carry weight without cracking. Because you've trained for this. You've rehearsed this. You've conditioned your mind to be stronger than your circumstances, to be sharper than your emotions, to be clearer than your doubts. And that kind of mind isn't found. It's built through repetition, through resilience, through relentless ownership. You're no longer just trying to improve. You're living as someone who already has. Because once your identity rises, your behavior follows. It's no longer a struggle to stay consistent. It's your standard. It's no longer a battle to follow through. It's what you do. This is when leadership takes over. Not leadership of others, leadership of yourself. Because true leaders aren't defined by their influence. They're defined by their alignment. And if you can lead yourself with clarity, courage, and consistency, there's no environment you can't thrive in. But you must be willing to be alone for a while. not forever, but long enough to make the change real, long enough to break old attachments, long enough to train new instincts, because you will outgrow people. You will leave behind environments. You will no longer relate to patterns you used to live by. And if you're not prepared for that part, you'll fall back. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. Because when pressure rises, we seek familiarity. And if you don't build new familiarity through repetition, you'll return to what used to feel like home, even if it was holding you back. So you build new reference points. You make growth your new normal. You surround yourself with people who hold you to your highest standard, not because they demand it, but because they live it. You create an environment where elevation is expected, where truth is valued over comfort, where alignment is celebrated more than applause. Because if you're not careful, your need to belong will sabotage your need to grow. You'll stay in rooms that no longer challenge you. You'll hold back your truth to keep the peace. You'll dim your light because someone else hasn't found theirs yet, and all of that will cost you. So you decide that alignment matters more than approval, that your growth matters more than your comfort, that your purpose matters more than your feelings. And that decision, made again and again, creates the kind of life that most people only dream about. You stop living for validation. You start living for values. You stop chasing outcomes. You start chasing excellence. You stop proving yourself. You start expressing yourself. Because now you're not building for applause. You're building from authenticity. And in that space, you find peace. Not because everything's easy, but because everything's true. You're no longer pretending. You're no longer performing. You're no longer adjusting your standard to fit the world. You're adjusting the world to match your standard. This is what it means to be rooted, to be grounded, to be driven by something deeper than dopamine, to be led by something stronger than emotion, to act from identity, not insecurity, to live with clarity, not confusion. And the best part? It's not complicated. It's not dramatic. It's simple. You honor your word. You do what you said you would. You treat your time like it matters. You speak truth to yourself. You hold the line when no one else does. You stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And you do it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, until it stops being effort and starts being normal. That's when your life changes, not all at once, but every day. You don't need a new year to change. You don't need a tragedy to wake up. You don't need permission, a new plan, or a perfect opportunity. You need a new mindset. And not one that just sounds good when life is easy, but one that holds when things get hard. That mindset is ownership. The mindset that says, no one's coming to save me, and that's not a problem. It's power. The mindset that takes radical responsibility for every thought, every action, every outcome. The mindset that rewires the question from who's to blame to what can I do? When that mindset is installed, everything changes. Your standards rise. Your excuses disappear. Your results accelerate. Because now you're not waiting, you're building. Now you're not reacting, you're leading. Now you're not stuck, you're shifting. And you realize something simple but powerful. You've always been the problem. But that means you've always been the solution. That awareness alone puts you in control. Because if it's your responsibility, you can fix it. You can change it. You can rewire it. So from this point forward, you stop outsourcing power. You stop waiting for motivation. You stop checking how you feel. And you start acting like the person you said you'd become. You let identity lead. You let discipline carry you. You let alignment define you. And every time you do that, every time you act from that mindset, even in the smallest ways, you're changing your life immediately. Not because the world shifted, but because you did. Not because everything got easier, but because you got sharper. That is your edge now. Not talent, not luck, not hype, ownership, the habit of choosing growth over comfort, the discipline of doing what you said you would, no matter how you feel, the courage to go all in on your future without waiting for external proof. That is how you create change, real change. You don't wait for the world to give you permission. You give it to yourself. And once you do, you never go back.